Welcome to the first Food and Migraine FAQ. I'm Isa, a certified coach in nutrition and the co-founder of the Good Days program. This video is made in collaboration with Migraine Buddy. So we receive a lot of questions about food and migraine, so I will answer a few today, but I won't be able to answer all of them, so please feel free to add yours in the comments. Let's start answering your questions.
I know my main trigger is barometric pressure. I've only found 2 foods that trigger me. Are there any major things to avoid that can increase migraine from barometric pressure?
Interesting question, as it introduces the migraine threshold theory. So for those of you who are not familiar to it, here is the link to the dedicated video. For the others, quick reminder, the migraine threshold is the level of risk you can bear before starting an attack. When you reach the migraine threshold, the symptoms appear. When I talk about risk, I mean food, but also stress, disrupted sleep, weather, anything you might be sensitive to. And what we know is that the risk pile up until they reach the threshold. So the goal to not start an attack is to stay below the threshold. So let's answer the question now. So on one side, we have several risk factors. And on the other side, we have the level of risk associated to each risk factor. The more you are sensitive to a risk factor, the higher the risk level will increase. So in your case, you know that you are highly sensitive to weather changes, food A and food B. Weather changes, there's not much you can do about it. So you need to work on the other sensitivities you have that you can control. So for example, on weather changes days, you avoid food A and food B, and you test all the other risk factors to identify potential other sensitivities. And once you know them, you can control them, manage them to stay under the threshold, even on weather adverse days. Don't forget to use the weather forecast in Migraine Buddy to know in advance when you're going to have some weather risky days.
Why can't I drink any alcohol anymore? Not even one drink. I've become so sensitive to one drink.
So this question is a bit difficult because it's vague. When you mean alcohol, we don't know exactly what drink you are referring to. For example, if you are having some beers or some wine or some cocktails, all of those drinks have different risk factors in it, not only alcohol. Alcohol is definitely one of the 20 identified food risk factors, but there are many more. And in beers you have gluten, and since it's fermented you also have glutamate, histamine and tyramine. In wine you have tannins, and in cocktails you have sugar. All of those are food chemicals risk factors. So which one are you sensitive to? In order to know that, there is only one way: you need to test them one by one and to find your sensitivities. Once you know your sensitivities, you can control them to stay below the threshold. So for example, you're having a beer with some nuts. Beer has 5 chemicals on its own. Nuts have 4 chemicals, 4 food risk factors. So it means that here you are exposed to 9 risk factors. You might be sensitive to 1, 2, 3, who knows? So you need to test them. If after testing you know that you are sensitive to histamine and gluten, for example, in this case, avoid beers and snack, but you might try something else and avoid symptoms.
I have realized fermented foods are a trigger for me. How can I enjoy them in moderation without tipping me over the edge? I love a good sourdough bread, yogurt and red curry, but it's too risky.
So this question illustrates perfectly the migraine threshold theory. Here again, we talk about food and not about risk factors, so let's see it in the risk factors way. Fermented food. Itself, it's already glutamate, tyramine, histamine. So there's already 3 risk factors in one food. It's the same for sourdough. You've got all those 3 plus gluten and salt. In yogurt, you've got casein and phenylethylamine. In red curry, you've got some capsaicin and some tannins. So you see here again, we have several risk factors, and the only question is which one or which ones are you sensitive to? In order to find out and to identify your sensitivities, you need to test each of these risk factors one by one, and once you know all of your sensitivities, you can control them to stay below the threshold.
Histamine foods give me migraines, so can taking an antihistamine help?
Antihistamine is not food, it's a medication. I'm not qualified to answer this kind of question. The only person qualified for it is your doctor. Please ask this question to your doctor.
Is there any evidence of reduction in migraines for people who shift to a vegetarian or vegan diet?
The answer to the question is no, as there are many vegetables that contain several risk factors, when most meat do not contain any. As long as meat like chicken, beef, pork, lamb, duck, etc. is not processed, smoked, cured, slowly cooked leftovers, processed in any way, this meat is fine. Whereas many vegetables are not migraine friendly. Tomatoes has 5 chemicals, bell pepper 2, and spinach 4. The answer to this question is no. Vegetarian and vegan diets are not migraine specific.
Gluten and migraine.
Gluten is one of the 20 food risk factors, and is found in many food, like wheat pasta, pizzas, bread, and many other food. So what you want to know is if you are sensitive to it. So test your sensitivity to gluten, and if you find out that you are sensitive to it, manage your intake to stay below your migraine threshold.
Is the keto diet or low glycemic diet or even sugar elimination better for migraine?
Keto diet eliminates only 4 of the 20 food risk factors: artificial sweetener, sugar, omega-6, and corn. So first case, you are sensitive to 1 or the 4 of those chemicals. In this case, indeed, you won't have any more migraines. But you will deprive yourself from eating a lot of food that is migraine friendly, because keto eliminates lots of other food. Second case, you are also sensitive to another risk factor. So in this case, you will still have migraine symptoms. The keto diet won't change anything. It might lower a little bit if you are sensitive to 1 of the 4 on top of other ones, but that's it. Only a migraine-specific diet can help you identify your food sensitivities. Keto is not a migraine-specific diet.
What's the number 1 food to avoid?
There is no real number 1 food risk factors. It all depends on your sensitivity. So you need to test each of the 20 risk factors one by one, find your sensitivities, control your intake, and stay below the threshold. Thank you for your attention. Please ask more questions in the comments. If you like this format, we will do more in the future. Check this channel for about 50 migraine-friendly recipes and thegooddaysprogram.com for more information on food and migraine. Wishing you a good day ahead, and see you on Friday with a new migraine-friendly recipe.